4 men leaned back outside the feed store, hats pulled low, fingers tucked deep in their coat sleeves. Silver coins clinked as they passed a wager between them. They laughed each time the widow crossed the street alone. They laughed because she had no husband beside her. They laughed because her home sat half buried into a hillside like a hole made by an animal. And they laughed because they were certain she would not last through a second winter. They never said it to her face. No one did. But the laughter followed her through town, sharp and cold, like an axe striking frozen wood. It followed her into the valley, up the ridge, into the small round door cut into the earth. Her name was Elsie Vaughn, and she carried herself with narrow shoulders and tired eyes. Her hands were rough, her face drawn thin by wind and loss. Yet there was something behind her eyes that never bent. Not when the roof leaked her first spring. Not when she gave birth in the dark with nothing but a stump to bite on. And not even when she buried her husband 3 weeks later with snow still on the ground and her baby crying in her arms. She did not cry that day. She did not cry afterward. Crying wasted heat. And in a place like hers, heat was everything. Her cabin sat tucked into a south-facing ridge, half swallowed by earth. A low green roof curved over it, packed with sod and grass. The round door was stacked from scavenged stone and salvaged timber. From a distance, it looked like a lump of ground with a chimney stub rising out of it. Folks in town called it a hobbit hole, laughing like it was a joke meant for children. But what lived inside was no storybook thing. It was a widow, a newborn girl with dark eyes, and a fire that almost never died. Elsie had not built it for looks. She had built it to live. The idea had come from a man passing through the valley the spring before her husband died. He had been an old Civil War engineer, his coat worn thin, his voice steady. He spoke of powder magazines built under hillsides back east, rooms buried deep to keep munitions from freezing. He said the earth held warmth longer than open air. He said stone remembered heat. Elsie listened, not because she planned to build anything then, but because she had learned that listening cost nothing. When her husband was gone and the trees were too wet to burn through winter, and the baby's hands were always cold, she remembered those words. She began with a root cellar, then she dug deeper. Then she stacked stone walls tight against bare clay. One beam became 2. She recalled a sketch her husband once drew on scrap paper, a curved roof like a barrel laid over a trench. She notched pine logs, braced them into the hillside, wrapped them in moss and hay and mud, then packed sod on top until grass grew. By fall, the cabin was finished. It did not stand proud. It crouched. It did not rise above the wind. It slipped beneath it. The other cabins across the valley were already worrying about wood. Men chopped each morning, hauling cords through snow, stacking them high in sheds and lean tows. They dried what they could, split what they had, and still feared it would not last. Elsie watched them from her ridge, then closed her door and tended her fire. She used half the wood they did. At first, folks said it was because she lived alone. One person needs less heat. But when February came and her baby did not fall sick, when she never once came asking for spare logs or kindling scraps, people began to notice. Smoke still rose from her chimney, low and steady, even when others let their fires die to save fuel. Old Man Lot was the first to climb the ridge. He came one evening with a bundle of wood under his arm, thinking to play the role of kind neighbor. Elsie opened the round door slowly, took the wood without smiling, and told him her daughter was sleeping and that he should not come again. But before the door closed, he saw enough to change the way he walked back down. He saw a floor laid with flat stones, warm underfoot. He saw a clay hearth set deep against the wall, tight and smart. He saw curtains stuffed with hay pulled close against a half-circle window. He saw a ceiling no taller than 6 feet, domed and snug like the inside of a stovepipe. He felt the heat, dry and steady, not smoky, not heavy. He went to the tavern shaking his head. He told them she lived inside the hill. He said the whole house was buried. Laughter followed. Men joked she would start growing turnips in the walls or smoking pipeweed with gophers. Even the school teacher laughed, but the chimney never stopped smoking, and the baby never caught cold. The second winter came early and hard. One storm dropped 2 feet of snow in a single night. Roofs cracked, porches caved. One man lost 3 toes to frost. By December, firewood ran low. Logs that seemed plenty in October were gone, or frozen, or wet. Creeks froze solid, forcing people to melt ice for water, burning more wood just to drink. Panic crept in with the cold. That was when the question started. How's that widow doing? You seen smoke up there. Maybe the wind's wrong. Maybe she's gone. She was not gone. They did not know about the stones, big flat rocks she had hauled and stacked like a mosaic across her floor. Not for looks, but for holding heat. She placed them beneath the stove and let the fire sink into them all day. When the flames died, the stones stayed warm well into morning. She lit one fire a day. At dawn, she fed it hard pine and let it burn low. She banked the coals thick, covered them with ash, closed the flue. By nightfall, the stones beneath her baby's crib still held warmth. She checked them with her palm. When the wind howled outside and men cursed green wood and empty piles, she laid another blanket across the door and let the hill do the work. Word traveled, first as whispers, then as rumor. Someone said she burned one log a day. Someone said her floor heated like a pie oven. Some laughed, others did not, especially those with no wood left. One night, a man named Bennett knocked. 2 boys stood behind him, one coughing, the other pale as ash. They had nothing left to burn. He had heard she might share warmth. Elsie opened the door, looked at the children, and stepped aside. They slept on the stone floor near the hearth. The baby did not wake. By morning, the frost on the boys' lashes had melted. Bennett said thank you and left. Then more came, not asking for charity, just looking. She let them stand inside for a moment, feel the stones, breathe the warm air. They left quiet, embarrassed, changed. The laughter stopped. By late January, men were digging into the south-facing ridge. Pickaxes struck frozen sod. Hands that once mocked her round door, now blistered trying to match what she had done alone in spring. Elsie did not gloat. She did not smile. She offered advice when asked. How to lay stone flat, how to slope the chimney, how to seal drafts with mud and ash and hay. That was enough. 3 above-ground cabins caved in February. Ice split beams. Wind tore shingles loose, but the buried home held. Smoke still rose from the widow's chimney. Her child played barefoot near warm stone while the valley froze. By March, no one laughed anymore. They were too busy staying alive. Too busy hauling ice and splitting what green wood remained. Children fell ill, livestock was lost. One grandmother did not wake, yet the widow's home stayed warm, tucked into earth like a pocket the blizzard could not reach. What once looked foolish now looked like foresight. Elsie never said she had built something better. She never claimed to outsmart anyone. But without speaking, she showed them all what survival looked like when pride was set aside. Then one evening a man named Jacob Milan stood at her door. He was large, quiet, and carried his hat like a boy in church. He had 6 mouths to feed and no knowledge of how to dig smart. He asked if she would come look, just once. Elsie studied his hands, his eyes, the way he waited without knocking. She nodded. She would come tomorrow. And with that single step across frozen snow, the valley began to change in ways no one yet understood. Elsie walked to Jacob Milan's land the next morning with her daughter bundled tight against her chest. Snow squeaked under her boots. Dr. Soft-Talk says, Dr. Soft-Talk stas. The wind cut low across the flats, but the sun struck the south side of the ridge just as she had said it would. Jacob waited with his hat in his hands, his shoulders hunched, not from cold, but from worry. His cabin stood proud and tall, logs stacked high, gaps stuffed with rags that still fluttered in the wind. Smoke poured from the chimney and vanished fast, wasted. She did not step inside. She walked past it, straight to the hill behind. She pressed her palm to the ground, scraped away snow with her boot, and tapped the earth with the heel of her shovel. She showed him where the soil stayed damp, where it stayed dense, where it would hold heat instead of letting it flee. She told him to dig into the slope, not fight it. She marked a curve in the snow with a shovel blade, low and wide. Jacob watched without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once and set to work. Others watched from a distance. Within days, another knock came, then another. A young couple whose baby coughed through the night. An old widow whose fingers ached so badly she could not sleep. Elsie did not invite them in at first. She stepped outside, pointed to hillsides, traced shapes in the snow, spoke quietly. She gave advice, not comfort. But people listened because the cold had stripped them of pride. Soon, 4 new pits scarred the ridge. Men dug with cracked hands, fighting frost and stone. They cursed and bled and kept going. Some tried to rush, cutting corners, digging too shallow. Elsie warned them. Some listened, some did not. When the next storm hit, it showed who had paid attention. Wind roared through the valley for 2 days straight. Snow piled high against doors. Roofs groaned. One shallow dugout flooded when meltwater slid down the hill. Another lost heat because the ceiling stood too tall, the warmth rising where it could not be used. Folks came back to Elsie, quiet now, asking what they had done wrong. She walked with them, baby on her hip, pointing to mistakes. She showed them where to slope a wall, where to pack clay tighter, where to lay stone before ever setting a stove. She never raised her voice. She never said she told them so. By midwinter, the laughter was gone from town. Even the men who had wagered silver coins stood silent when she passed. One removed his hat, another looked at his boots. None spoke. Firewood became the measure of fear. Stacks shrank. Axes dulled. Men woke before dawn to chop what little remained. Some cabins went dark by night. Families huddled under blankets, breath fogging the air inside. But the buried homes stayed steady. Smoke rose slow and low. Inside, stones held yesterday's warmth. Then the preacher arrived. He came from the east with polished boots and a voice that filled rooms. He stood in town and spoke of order and tradition. He said homes should stand upright, not hide in dirt like animals. He said it was not right for a woman to live alone, nor proper for her to teach men how to build. Some nodded. Many did not. He climbed the ridge and shouted at her door. He called her way unnatural. He said the earth was for the dead, not the living. Elsie opened the door, listened, then closed it without a word. The ground beneath her feet stayed warm. The people kept building. Winter deepened. A school teacher from the next county brought her class to see the cabin that used half the wood. Children stepped inside wide-eyed, boots steaming, hands pressed to warm stone. Elsie let them touch, let them feel. She said nothing more. Spring came hard and wet. Rain fell for days. Snowmelt swelled creeks. Mud slid from hillsides. Cabins built too low flooded. Foundations shifted. Families climbed to lofts, listening to water slosh below. Elsie's cabin stayed dry. She had dug a trench behind it, filled with rock and broken clay, guiding water away. Her door sat raised, shielded by sod and timber. Not a drop crossed the stone floor. Those who copied her fully fared the same. Those who tried to improve her design learned the cost of guessing. By summer, the valley looked different. Hillsides bore green humps dotted with round doors. Smoke rose from the earth itself. People called them hill homes now. They burned less wood. They slept warmer. Children coughed less. A man from a newspaper arrived in April, coat too thin, boots too clean. He asked questions. He wanted a picture. Elsie refused. He called her a symbol. She said she was a mother. He left with notes anyway, and soon strangers arrived, curious, careful, respectful. The third winter was worse than the second. Snow came heavy and stayed. Wind snapped trees. A flood took out one cabin entirely, but the hill homes held. Earth did not shift. Roofs did not sag. Firewood piles lasted longer than anyone thought possible. That winter, Elsie took in 2 orphaned boys whose parents drowned crossing a frozen creek. She laid them near the hearth, wrapped them in wool, showed them where the stones stayed warmest. By morning, they smiled. By spring, they helped fetch stones. her home filled with quiet life. Children came each morning while parents worked. Elsie fed them simple food, taught them letters, showed them how to sweep ash without wasting heat. It was not called a school, but it became one. Knowledge passed hand to hand, stone to stone. Not everyone learned easily. Caleb Dowser built the largest cabin in the valley, high and proud. He mocked the buried homes, called them rat dens. His sons fell sick that winter, frost-bitten toes, blood on pillows. His wife came to Elsie at night, ashamed, asking only for advice. Elsie gave it. 2 weeks later, Dowser tore into his hillside and began to dig. She did not watch. She did not smile. Years passed. Buried homes outnumbered log cabins. Builders dug first, then raised walls. Stone floors became standard. Curved ceilings followed. The schoolteacher built one. So did the doctor's helper. A newspaper returned, this time with a camera. Elsie agreed. They photographed her and her daughter at the round door, chimney puffing behind them, grass roof glowing in fall light. The caption spoke of warmth and survival. It did not mention firewood, but everyone understood. Then came the fire. A dry summer turned grass to tinder. Wind caught a coal bucket and ran with it. Flames climbed hillsides. Above-ground cabins burned fast. Families fled with children in their arms. One boy was lost to smoke. Buried homes fared better. Earth did not burn. Stone did not catch flame. After that, fireproofing became law in the valley, though no one wrote it down. Damp moss behind hearths, stone between flue and beam, short chimneys braced tight. Things Elsie had done without naming them now spread by word of mouth. By the 10th winter, 40 hill homes dotted the land. None burned more wood than hers. None stayed warmer longer. Mabel grew tall, sharp-eyed, sure-handed. She learned to judge soil by touch, slope by sight. She built homes for widows, for the old, for those who could no longer swing an axe. One day, she built her own. It was small, round, tight as a drum. She lit the fire once. The stone floor stayed warm for 3 days. Elsie stood in the doorway that night, watching her daughter tend a hearth shaped by her own hands. Something old and frozen loosened in her chest. This was no longer survival alone. It was legacy. But the valley had not yet faced its hardest test, and what came next would prove whether the warmth they had learned to build could withstand more than winter alone. The hardest test did not come from cold. It came from loss, fire, and time. The winter after Mabel built her own hill home passed quietly. Snow fell deep, but no one froze. Fires stayed low. Wood piles lasted. Children laughed more than they coughed. The valley had learned how to live with winter instead of fighting it. Then spring came fast and rough. Ice broke loose in the river earlier than anyone remembered. Water rose high and angry, swallowing low ground, tearing fences free. One old log cabin shifted on its base and split apart. Families ran uphill with what they could carry. Buried homes held. Earth stayed firm. Stone did not float. The widow's cabin did not move an inch. That was when the last doubts finally died. People stopped asking if her way worked. They started asking how to make it better without breaking it. Elsie answered carefully. She warned them not to rush, not to build bigger than needed, not to forget why the homes worked in the first place. Low ceilings, tight doors, stone floors, earth pressed close. Some listened. Some learned the hard way. The summer after the flood was dry. Grass turned brittle. Wind came hot from the south. Everyone remembered the last fire. Everyone cleared brush, packed mud thicker around hearths, sealed cracks twice over. Elsie walked the ridge with Mabel, checking chimneys, touching walls, reminding people where fire liked to hide. When flames came again, they were smaller, slower. Above ground sheds burned, fences burned, but homes stayed standing. Hill homes stayed safe. A child was not lost that year. Time passed the way it always does on the frontier, quiet when things worked, loud when they failed. Children grew. Old men bent further. New families arrived thin and tired, carrying fear in their eyes. They did not ask if the buried homes were foolish. They asked where to dig. The valley shared what it had learned. Elsie grew older without noticing at first. Her hair grayed, her hands slowed, but the stone floor beneath her feet stayed warm, just as it always had. Mabel took on more of the work, more of the teaching. She spoke with calm confidence. She corrected mistakes without shaming. People listened to her the same way they once listened to her mother. One winter, sickness came through the valley. Not cold sickness, but fever. It moved fast from cabin to cabin. Elsie brought the sick into her home, laid them on the stones, fed them broth, kept the air warm and steady. Some lived, some did not, but fewer died than in nearby counties. Doctors noticed. They asked questions. They wrote things down. Elsie did not care about their notes. She cared about the people on her floor. When Mabel's daughter was born, the child cried strong and loud. Elsie held her near the hearth, feeling the heat through bone and skin. The same stones, the same warmth. 3 generations now breathing the same steady air. The firewood stacks outside the widow's cabin never grew tall. They did not need to. Where others still burned logs morning and night, Elsie's home asked for little. One fire, one careful burn. Heat held by stone and earth given back slowly, kindly. People began measuring winter in new ways, not by how much wood they cut, not by how high the smoke rose, but by how long warmth stayed after the fire died. And by that measure, the widow's cabin was always ahead. Years later, a man from the state returned, older now, quieter. He asked to see the first hill home, the one that started it all. Elsie walked him inside. He stood barefoot on the stones and closed his eyes. He said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, he said, "You changed how people survive winter." Elsie shook her head. "I just didn't waste heat." The man left with his papers. He took drawings this time. He taught others what he had learned here. Buried homes spread beyond the valley. Not everywhere, not fast, but enough. Some folks still laughed in other places. They always did, until their wood ran out. When Elsie died, it was quiet, peaceful, in her sleep. The fire was low. The stones were warm. Mabel found her in the morning, wrapped in wool, face calm. She did not cry right away. She banked the fire first. Old habits mattered. They buried Elsie on the ridge above her home, where the sun hit first in winter. No stone marker, just a simple post. People came from miles away, not to mourn loudly, but to stand near the place where everything had changed. That winter was one of the coldest on record. Rivers froze solid. Wind tore through open land. Firewood prices doubled in nearby towns. People froze elsewhere, but in the valley, smoke still rose low and steady from hillsides. Doors did not freeze shut. Children slept through the night. They burned half the wood they once had. Mabel took over fully then. She taught. She built. She corrected. She protected what mattered. When someone tried to cut corners, she stopped them. When someone mocked, she let winter answer. Years later, travelers still came looking for the famous cabin. Some expected something grand. They found a small round door in the earth, a place easy to miss. Inside, warmth waited. If they were lucky, they met Mabel's daughter, grown now, stone dust on her hands, shovel over her shoulder. If they asked about the widow, she told them the truth. She built to survive, not to be seen. By then, no one laughed at buried homes. No one called them foolish. They called them smart. They called them necessary. They called them home. And when winter came, hard and long, the valley endured quietly, warmly, on half the firewood.